Welcome, everyone, to Stepping Into Your Leadership. I'm your host, Christine Courtney. Our goal here is to give you some actionable takeaways that will help you lead your teams. Thanks for joining us on this leadership journey. Let's get started. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Leadership Studio. I am thrilled today to be back with my buddy, my pal, my colleague, my thought partner, Elaine Porcher is here today. Welcome, Elaine.
Hi, Christine. Thanks for having me. It's so cool to be back.
It's so cool. And it's really cool today because we're going to talk about something that I know nothing about. And Elaine has been begging me. She's like, I got to talk to you about this scarf model, which is what we're going to do today. And I trust her so much that I know if she loves it this much and she works with it with a lot of her clients and so forth, that it would be great to share with you guys today. And I'm going to learn right along with you. So those of you who have listened to our Working Genius episodes will know that I have my two working geniuses are discernment and galvanizing. And today I'm going to have my discernment hat on, Elaine. So get ready for lots of questions and lots of trying to understand right along with people. But I'm really excited because Elaine's going to share with us this scarf model. And if you've never heard of this framework, then you'll learn right along with us. And if you had, maybe you'll get some new tidbits or tips on how to implement it into your work. So welcome.
Hi, Christine, again. Yes, thank you. I am always so excited to talk about this framework. The SCARF model is something that I use a lot in coaching, in workshops, and basically it's these 5 social emotional areas that all humans basically need to thrive. And when you think of Maslow's hierarchy, right, those basic needs that all humans need in order to live, well, it's the same thing with SCARF, except for these are emotional needs that we all have. And whether we have them or not triggers a reward or threat response in us. So it's so interesting. And I'd love to kind of talk to you also about like how that relates to our work, like the managers who want to motivate their folks. But let's get into it. Okay. So neuroscientist David Rock, he has the Neuro Leadership Institute, and he has 2 books. One is called Your Brain at Work, and another one is called Quiet Leadership. Well, he introduced this model in around 2008. So it's a relatively new model. There are a lot of folks that are using it. So pretty much there are these 5 basic emotional needs, and that's status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And it's the acronym SCARF, right? So depending on how we interact with each other based on these needs, we are either motivated or demotivated or recede in a sense. So and so if we get these things, we're triggered or we're not triggered. And some of us, like the status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness, some of these are stronger in some of us versus others. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that too. So some of us are triggered by status more than others. And some of us are not as motivated by fairness as others. So it's really kind of interesting in the work and how folks thrive in the work. And we can help support our staff and the people that we manage if we understand what each staff members or what our direct reports' basic needs are or where they're strongest.
Okay, so it's really, are you saying like it's a tool for kind of improving your self-awareness, maybe your self-regulation, but also your kind of emotional intelligence, social intelligence, communication skills, the way you work with other people, that kind of thing. Is that right?
So it's interesting to kind of notice it in ourselves, but we want to notice it in the people around us. That if we realize that, let's say autonomy is like top of the list for me, then I can notice when I need to be more autonomous or when I need to be more independent. And I can let the people around me know that too, so that they can provide more opportunities for me to be independent, and the same with the rest of them. So would you like to go into the different areas?
Yeah. So let's go because, I have my first questions, which maybe everybody else has, because when you hear it, and maybe this will get clearer, but when you hear status, I wrote them down as you were saying them, status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness, right? When you hear those, I think some people out there might be like me going, well, doesn't everybody want those things? Can't I be all of those, or can't I have all of those?
Right.
Are you saying there's ways to tell if you're from a neuroscience perspective, if things, did they like see that parts of your brain lit up more in these when they studied?
So, well, in general, yes. So I got to tell you, I'm not quite sure about the fMRI experience as far as like relatedness and all of the different parts of the SCARF model, but we all need every bit of these areas. So all of these areas motivate us. But for some of us, and you'll notice that within yourself as we go through them, and I just would love for everyone else to kind of challenge yourself to kind of think, does this thing really matter to me? Does this thing really not matter to me? So it's kind of a unofficial kind of a study in a sense, but you'll notice as it comes up that some things matter to you more and you are more motivated in one area versus another. Similar to the working genius, right? Or any of those other assessments that you may have taken where it's unscientific, but you notice this thing motivates you more than others. So you talked about discernment and galvanizing. You know that you're thriving when you're galvanizing. And same thing with these particular areas, that you're really thriving when your status is lit up, when your status is recognized and you're able to work in that. You feel better about yourself, you feel happier, and you feel more motivated. And maybe if I go through them, some of this will be a little more clear.
Great. Yep.
Let's start with status. Okay, so status is where you are in the community, who you are, and your status or your standing in that community. And a perfect example is, let's just say you're in a staff meeting. Christine, you're in a staff meeting, you're providing valuable information to the staff, and someone challenges you and says, Christine, what you're saying is absolutely untrue. And you know what, Christine, you really don't know what you're talking about. Then you might feel threatened because your status in this particular community, you being a leader, you're an executive in this community, you need to look good. And you need to be credible. You need to be legitimate. And if someone challenges your legitimacy, then your threat system is automatically triggered. Your amygdala sets off the alarm and you're like, red alert, red alert, red alert. Now, how you respond to this can be several ways. You may recede. You may look at that person and take a mental note that, oh, this person is, I'm not going to talk to that person, or I might be combative in this moment. You might want to defend yourself and defend yourself in a really, really defensive manner. And so all of these things, that how you react when you're being threatened will arise in that moment. And conversely, let's just go back to this meeting. You're in this meeting. As you're talking, you're giving out these numbers, company information, and people say to you, wow, Christine, you must have put a lot of effort into putting together that report because this sounds really great. This makes a lot of sense. I totally understand what you're saying, and you are leading us in a good direction. Now, your status is your reward system is kicking in. You build trust with this group, you start to feel closer to this group, and you feel better about the information you're giving, you feel more confident, and you feel great with this group of people. So you kind of see how that works with the status piece. Mm-hmm. Now, there are some folks who, and we kind of all know that, and some of those folks may be us, sometimes it's me, where you're in a meeting and maybe it's not as egregious, but someone challenges you in that meeting and says, I don't know if those numbers are correct. And even if it's a small challenge, if status is high on the list for you, your amygdala is sounding the alarm. But if status is low for you, you may take that, or maybe middle of the road, you may take that challenge and say, well, this person has a question about the numbers. I'll just give them the answers, or I'll look into that. Or if there's something that I did wrong, maybe I'll correct it for the next time. But again, if status is high for you, you may be combative at the smallest amount of questioning that might happen in that meeting. Does that make sense?
Yep. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, right. So let's go on to certainty. So
okay.
Certainty is this idea of expectations. I expect a certain thing to happen. I know that's going to happen, and I feel good about it. If that thing doesn't happen, my threat system is triggered. I know the sun is going to shine every day. I know I'm going to wake up and go to an office where people are there. I go out to the bus to catch my bus to go to work. It shows up at 8 a.m. All is right in the world with me. I need to know that the things that I do know are going to happen in the way they happen. However, if that goes wrong, if the bus is not there on time, if you get to work and no one is there, you start to wonder, hey, what's going on here? And within the work, if you are told work is a certain way, and then one day it suddenly changes without any notice or any communication, the alarm is sounded. And then your threat system jumps into play. So we all have a certain expectation at work, right? Our managers, and all of our supervisors, everyone at our workplace kind of is in flow, or there's a particular routine that happens. If that routine is disrupted and we are not notified about the disruption in the routine, we are now feeling weird, we feel crazy, and we want to go find the person who's responsible for this disruption. And sometimes that person is our boss, because our bosses or our managers tend to believe, or your direct reports believe, that you run everything. Anything that goes wrong, it's your fault, right? So then they feel like this is your fault. Then they respond either by receding, by being combative, showing up to work late. If the expectations are not laid out correctly, I'm going to be passive aggressive. And then that disrupts the flow of work. And then sometimes as managers, you look at your folks and you're like, why is this person not performing? Well, you laid out a certain set of expectations that maybe we didn't all live up to. So
don't mean to interrupt you, but I would imagine it's even more likely that you didn't lay out a set of clear expectations. Like if I'm to look at myself in this, because my guess would be, and I haven't heard all of them, but my guess would be that this would not be big on my list of things that are important to me. And therefore I could easily overlook providing this type of concrete clarity and clear pathway for the folks that work for me.
Right. And that's it. That's why you have to look at yourself first, because the things that are not high on your list, you might not provide for your direct reports. And then, that can be a recipe for disaster, or a minor disaster. Oh, man. So the next one is autonomy. And autonomy is my favorite one that I like to talk about, because it's so interesting how it comes up. So just to kind of get, autonomy is the idea of independence, being able to work on your own and being able to work independently or do anything independently. So just to kind of give you an example, my grandmother is 98 years old. My grandmother and my mom, they live together, and my grandmother is pretty capable. She just had a setback, but before that, she's very capable, very sharp, has all her faculties in order. But my mom, knowing that my grandmother is older, wants to help her with everything. She wants to fix up her food the way my mom wants it, or just make sure, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? And my grandmother's constantly waving her off. She's like, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. And the thing is, my grandmother is fighting for autonomy, because as she's getting older, she wants to still show that she's capable and independent, right? And the thing about that is, if we go back 200,000 years ago, because our brains are wired for this, right? Since inception, if we are capable and independent, we are accepted into the tribe, right? The tribe wants us because we're capable, we're autonomous, and maybe we can teach the tribe something new. And if we're accepted by the tribe, it means safety, it means shelter, food, water, all of the things, right? But if we do not seem capable, and if we are a detriment to the tribe, then we get kicked out of the tribe. And that could mean having to face the saber-toothed tiger on our own and fend for ourselves. So that wiring still sticks with us. So when we have something like autonomy that comes up, we want to show that we're capable. And this comes up with like our toddlers or our really young ones as well. So for all of you who have really young ones that you're rearing, and you might notice, and Christine, I felt like you told me a story about your son years ago.
Years
and years ago, where when he's learning how to dress himself, right? And this happens a lot of times when kids are trying to learn how to dress themselves, and they insist on wearing outfits that we don't think are as appropriate for the real world. So
I know what you're going to say.
So we want to try to help them. And what happened in this particular situation is Miles had a pair of pink cowboy boots. I hope that he doesn't come back for me later on down the line.
He would probably wear them today.
Oh, all right, Miles. Yes.
At least on the soccer field, he wants pink boots all the time. So who knows?
Yes. So he had these pink cowboy boots. And on first glance, you thought, does he really want these pink cowboy boots? So you try to give him wise counsel on the cowboy boots. And he said, no, this is what I want. And you relented, of course, the person that you are. You're like, there's nothing wrong with pink cowboy boots, but is that a choice that you really want to make? But he just stuck to his guns and was like, I'm going to wear these pink cowboy boots because when we're really, really young, we want to show that we're growing into adulthood or growing into our teenage years, or we're growing into capability. So if we have autonomy, then we are capable. And look, mom, look what I can do. I can pick out my own clothes. See these great pink cowboy boots. So this autonomy comes into play in the workplace because we need our folks to come up with great fresh ideas. And how we're able to help them come up with these great fresh ideas is having them be autonomous. If we are constantly micromanaging them and telling them how to do a project every step of the way, it must be done like this. Let me give you the answers. As a matter of fact, let me just take the project from you and do all of these parts. You kind of shut down the parts of your direct reports that can really shine. So we all have these ideas that are, in the back of our minds that sometimes we don't always want to bring to the forefront because, people might shut them down. And if you are taking that autonomy away, you're taking away those ideas. So we want our folks to be autonomous so that they can flourish in these great ideas. But then we also are building trust. We're saying, I trust that you are capable. I trust that you have these great ideas. I trust that you can get the job done if I just let you. And this you'll notice. And so I have to tell you, my supervisor, who is Blanca, for all that you've met Blanca before, Blanca provides me with a lot of autonomy. And she says it to me out loud too. So it's not just something that, she knows. We have this conversation so that the trust is built. Hey, Elaine, I know that you can work independently and I trust that you can do a good job. Go fly and be free. So, and what that does for me is that says, wow, you believe in me. You believe that my ideas are good and you believe that the work I do is quality work. So we have this wonderful symbiotic relationship because, and for me, autonomy is high. I need to feel independent. So she gives me those opportunities to be able to strike out on my own, as you will.
Yeah. And it's exactly what Daniel Pink talks about in the book Drive. For those of you out there who've read that, as one of those important aspects of building intrinsic motivation in people, right? More important than many, many other things is that ability to feel like they're autonomous in their jobs, builds a sense of ownership of anything. So I love that idea. All right, great. So we've got status, certainty, autonomy. Now what's relatedness? Because that one sounds confusing.
Right. And so relatedness is our sense of belonging. It's our sense of being part of groups. If I know that I am accepted into the tribe, if I know I'm accepted on these teams, if I know that you value me socially, then I'm a happier worker. I'm a happier person. And there's synergy that is created. However, and my reward system is triggered. But if I feel that there are silos, if there are cliques, if there is favoritism, or if I am bullied or made fun of, or if I feel like I'm not an integral part of the team, then I am unhappy. And it's not just like bullying or bad behavior, but if the team is fractured in some way and I don't feel like I can be part of a group that has synergy and thrives together, then I am not happy. So the interesting thing is this kind of relates to working genius in that one of my geniuses is enablement, right? And when we talk about enablement, these are the folks that are the back rubbers, help to move the work socially, right? The supporters, the cheerleaders, you can do it. And what I'm finding is a lot of folks that have this enablement piece also have this high relatedness piece because they are more social. They're in that green quadrant. For some of us who do some of the assessments that we do that, have the different quadrants. These are the social folks that thrive socially. Christine, I've heard you say, when we're in the office that you can always hear me telling a story, right? Like all day I'm talking to the point of like, it's hard for me to work because I can't help myself.
And then you'll be like, guys, be quiet. I need to work. And we're like, you're the only one talking.
Oh my God. That's like, this is just so funny. It is like the most interesting to me because I'm like, this is me. I'm like, I need to work. Like, it's to my detriment. It's to my detriment. I can't help myself. I'm a social butterfly. Yeah, yeah. So like the relatedness piece is big for folks like me who are very social and who actually notice that. So again, Christine, you and Blanca and other folks who notice this about me, that I am very social, and they don't know that it is quote unquote relatedness that I'm thriving in, but they see that I thrive in that social setting. So people will ask me to be on certain teams that are very social or that need to build social capital.
I'll give an example. Elaine started when we had to go remote for COVID, right? Elaine was craving the ability to have that kind of inner office dialogue, that we had in our open office. So she started, and we still do it, but to varying degrees, I'm sure, of success in your mind, but she started on Friday mornings. And it's happening right now without us because we're taping this on a Friday.
I'm dying.
It's called Mostly Work Chat, and it's an open chat on Teams where people can just come in or out at their own will, talk about work sometimes, mostly, sometimes talk about, what happened at the Oscars or, whatever's going on. Do you have a recipe for this? Sneaks in, and then someone pops in and says, hey, what's going on with this client? And some of that happens. And people that hate it just don't come. But people that want, I guess, this relatedness, like Elaine, show up, pop in or pop out. And when I have done that before, it's been very funny to see all of a sudden a new person pop in. It's just as if we were in our office and someone pops into the conversation all of a sudden. So I guess to me, what you just gave me, that I thought that Mostly Work Chat is an example of somebody like you who values relatedness, offering that as an opportunity to be like a lifeline to like other people who would like that relatedness. So I appreciate that.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And I appreciate that, Christine. Because the thing is, right, so there's a lot of oxytocin happening here because I see that Christine I already know that Christine recognizes my relatedness or my need for relatedness. And as as a person who manages me, I'm building trust with Christine. I'm happy that she sees me, that she knows who I am, and that she knows what I need. So then she's able to provide other projects for me based on my need. So, that is how we can kind of supporting our direct reports. When we know that this is a need of theirs, then we can find the opportunities for our folks to thrive and flourish pretty much.
All right. So we got one more, fairness.
One more, fairness. So this is very interesting because when I do the VIA Character Strengths Finder workshop for folks, in most companies, fairness ranks high on the list among company-wide strengths, meaning that folks really are looking for fairness and they want to be fair. The only thing is it doesn't always kind of come across, right? But fairness is the idea of justice, that I'm being treated fairly and being given and treated, provided with all fairness in a sense, right? It's exactly how it sounds. And our threat system can be triggered easily if we feel like we're not being treated fair. And this is evident in the world with unions. The reason why we have unions is because workers were not treated fair before the inception of unions. So we were able to also see that with the SAG after strike, right? That it was one of the longest strikes in history. So we were able to kind of see in real time on our television screens, like how these people felt that they were being treated unfair. But if you're treating your staff fairly, then they're working with you well, they feel great about the work, they feel that trust is built. But if your staff feels like you are not treating them fair, then you have a myriad of problems: showing up late, being defensive, forming packs of folks where, there's dissension that happens in those packs, excuses on why the work can't be done, everything, you name it, it's happening.
I would imagine a lot of HR issues for sure, like a lot of complaints, a lot of them being mired in the paperwork of people's complaints. And, because you're not consistently addressing people and issues that arise, I would imagine.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, and I'm sure if you looked at a lot of the complaints that came from HR, a lot of them are rooted in fairness or lack of fairness in a sense. So it's something that we kind of take for granted. but something we all need, right? We all need all five of them. And I got to tell you, interestingly enough, for me, fairness is kind of low for me. I've done this almost like unscientific assessment on myself. And one of the reasons why I believe that fairness is low for me is because I have the assumption that I'm always being treated fairly. So I have this assumption that at work, I'm being treated fairly, and sometimes out in the world too, really, because this is for everything, right? This is at work, at home, who we are. But particularly, I tend to believe that I work at a place that treats me fair. So I believe that that is happening. So my reward system is triggered, and for me, trust is built. I feel supported in fairness. And so that's something that is not like a big concern.
Okay, so let's just give people, I want to make sure that people understand, if you're looking at this, probably listening already to Elaine, you're figuring out which ones are big for you. Now, usually, Elaine, when you do this, when you go through this self process for yourself first, are you kind of ranking them? Because obviously they're all important, right? Like, are you kind of ranking them like, okay, I would think this is most important to me, second, third, fourth, or do you have a top two? How do you usually think about it? How do people think about it?
Right. So there's no pretty much like ranking, but you can feel which ones pull more or less. So for some folks, honestly, all five may be really, really strong for you. But for some folks, like for instance, relatedness, there are people that I know at leadership that relatedness is not high on the list for them, right? So that's evident through mostly work chat, right? Some of the folks that don't show up, and which is fine because these are people that don't need to be massaged like I need to be massaged. But
she's talking true. Metaphorically.
Oh yes, metaphorically, right? In relatedness. So there, it's not a ranking kind of like Strengths Finder is a ranking like your number one strength is this, but there are some things that just pull more in one direction than others. So for instance, when I'm coaching people, I use the SCARF model a lot, and I ask them to look at which of these or which ones are really strong for you. And a lot of folks will say, oh yeah, well, status is big for me. A lot of managers, as a matter of fact, status is really big for me. And maybe autonomy is big for me, but status comes up a lot for managers. But for other folks, fairness might be top of the list. So anyway, there's not a ranking per se, but some of these may gnaw at you more than others.
Okay, so let's say you're doing this just like in your coaching, and the person says status is really big for me. So then what do you do with that information that helps them? What's the next step in that process?
Right. So if status is big for me, then I'm asking that person to look at those places where they feel supported in status. Because first we have to look at where it's happening. Before we do anything, we have to kind of have that assessment. So just auditing what's happening at work, where are these places in the work that you feel your status is being fed, where your reward system is being fed? Because then we want to look at those areas that we can bolster. Right? Because there's some things that we just kind of can't get away from. And I don't really like to look at like the places that we're weakest in that. I want to look at where we can thrive. So where's that happening already? And how can we increase that or provide more opportunities for status to be, for your status to shine, right? Because that's the thing. If status is big, so if we go back to that meeting situation, where can you provide your expertise to your group, so that you can be seen as someone that is capable, and so that your status in the group, in the tribe, has raised.
Okay, great. So that's a great tip out there. If you're listening, if you have status as one of your top ones as you're listening to this and you're like, yeah, that might be me, then think about like, are there opportunities for you to provide expertise, right? To speak up, to share something, to put yourself in for a promotion, to say, kind of put your hat in the ring for something. I think there's also probably some tips out there. If you have, I know when I listen to Elaine share this, I immediately think of some people on my team that most likely have this, in my estimation, have this as something that's important to them. And I'm immediately thinking of like, how do I recognize their achievements more? How do I recognize them publicly? How do I, do that for them personally? And then also, how do I provide some growth opportunities? Because I would imagine that somebody whose status is important, if you're not giving them growth opportunities, they're going to go somewhere else because they're looking for that status as a way of some sort of reward system in their brain, right? How do I get to the next level? And it's not to say that everybody doesn't need that, because of course, I think everybody needs all of these things to some degree, but it's like, how are you giving them, sometimes I don't even have new jobs available. Like I don't have a growth opportunity, but maybe I have a new project that could give a little shine to somebody and say, hey, this is really important to our company. Can I put you in charge of this project? And that provides a growth opportunity. So I feel like those are some tips under status.
Absolutely. And what we can do is, especially with our employees that need nudges, right? So we sometimes have employees that are having some challenges, right? And maybe we need to work with them or we need to coach them. But if you can put them into these scenarios or these situations where they can thrive, they feel more confident and then they will perform. If your employees are happy and they feel confident, they will perform. And that's what we want for them. Mm-hmm.
If they're being fed these things that drive them, right? Because I know we don't have much time, Elaine. What are some tips for certainty? If certainty is for you or if certainty is for others, right?
You have to be what you say. If you lay out the expectations, you must maintain them. So whatever you said, you have to still stand by that thing. That's it. You just need to maintain the expectations and also to have these conversations with your direct reports so that they understand the expectation and that you understand that and that you're having that conversation. So,
okay, great. And I think my clue to this type of person, I believe, would be like, if people are talking about transparency or clarity of roles, this is probably big on their list. So I'm going to be sure that those people maybe get a follow-up email after a conversation where I think I'm clear in how I'm speaking, but maybe they need even more clarity written down. So that might be a way to communicate more often, especially if this isn't big for me. All right, autonomy. What are some tips for autonomy?
Provide independent work. Do not take work away from people. Do not micromanage. Allow your direct reports to do the work. And if it doesn't come out perfect, then you guys can have that conversation and give them tips on improvement. Let them go back and try it again. I know that we don't always have a lot of time or the space or the opportunities to always kind of like, try things over and over again. But it's important that you allow for mistakes and allow your direct reports to work out solutions on their own so that they can improve their own critical thinking.
Yeah, good note, because a lot of times people confuse this autonomy piece, I would imagine, with like delegation and kind of seagull management, where you just like give it to them and then like fly off, and then you're like panic and you fly back in and snatch that sandwich back out of their hand on the beach or whatever. And we don't want to be those seagulls. So the point is like, how do you get to a point with somebody where you trust them, and you, like Blanca, the example you gave with Blanca and yourself, Blanca and you have worked together for a long time. She probably wouldn't have been just giving you so much autonomy right away, but certainly you can give it earlier than you think.
Right.
Especially if you know this is important to people, and just figure out check-ins that are comfortable for both of you along the way, so that they're not micromanaging them. Because if the person is mentioning the term micromanagement, I think that's a clue that autonomy is big for them. So then you have to figure out like, okay, how do I do this where we're both comfortable and we're both motivated? I love it. What about relatedness? What are some tips for building relatedness or helping with that?
Being conscious of how your teams are working, making sure there are no cliques that are forming, and making sure that teams are working together, that people are not in just silos. Also, building in fun, interesting moments for your team. Team building actually helps with this, or, fun workshops with the leadership program where we can kind of broaden your team so that they can build trust with each other and work well with each other.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's very hard. You said make sure cliques aren't being created. And I think that's so hard because a lot of people go, how can I influence that? But the interesting thing is that cliques are forming no matter what, right? Relatedness is forming, and that could be positive or negative. So I do think a lot of people will say, I don't want to do team building. We just need to focus on the work. Why are we wasting time with this? We need to go home to our friends and family and bond there, not at work. You hear those voices all the time, whether it's, from people, from, or on TikTok or whatever. But the reality is that you and I know when we're in there, these cliques are forming. People are wasting your time at work in their teams anyway. They might be bitching about you or the company, or they could be having to like shine the light on like, let's see how we can work together better, how we can kind of break up some of these teams by watching it in reality. So I think that's a great and really hard. Relatedness is hard. You have to really strengthen your emotional intelligence to be good at it. But if you do, you can tell it right away when the companies you walk into that have a strong sense of relatedness is very powerful. All right, fairness, last but not least.
Oh man, you have to do an audit of yourself. Are you treating everyone fair? And it's something that you really have to work hard at. This is one of the more difficult ones because in your mind, you might think that you're treating everyone fairly or evenly. And I don't think everybody should be treated equally in that, some people need more of this, some people need more of that. So like everyone doesn't get the same thing, but you must be equitable in the work that you do. So just really kind of looking at how equitable you are and how you are providing work, promotions, and opportunities. And you have to just really ask yourself that question. It's a tough one, but something that you have to really kind of look at.
Yeah, and certainly if you have, if you're lucky enough to have an HR department or something like that, this person should be your partner in that process.
Yes.
Right? They're probably in that human resources, people development, because they're good at this and they have an understanding of what is required compliance wise. And I think there can be a real partner in kind of questioning you about this. Even if it's salaries, sometimes you can get really pressured by people that just ask the most or the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and that another person to audit yourself with can help you, because It's really hard to do it all yourself. So I think getting some, and also, maybe another tip in this is some surveys to your staff.
Yes.
Asking them regularly, do they feel like they're treated fairly? Do they feel like things are transparent enough? Do they feel like when conflicts arise that they're handled? That's the other thing. Don't let things sit. Right? It sits, it gets worse. Really work on things, especially problems right away so that people, even if you can't solve it right away, if you could just kind of let people know, I'm looking into this, or this is important and I want to make sure that it's fair. Elaine, you mentioned via Strengths Finders, and I just want to say for those listeners out there, if you want to know more about that, we have a bonus episode that came out back on February 6th. It's bonus episode number 6 that will take you to that one of Elaine talking about the Strengths Finders assessment and what that will work. And Tatiana says that she'll put it in the notes also with a link to that episode. So I know that we're out of time, Elaine, and I want to be, I'm so thankful that you brought this to me. I'm going to research it a little more. I'm embarrassed to say on my shelf, I have A Brain at Work by David Rock.
That's so funny.
I know. And so I'm going to go back and read some of that research that I'm sure backs up this scarf model. But give it a go yourself. If you're out there listening, think about just for yourself, what are the ones that are more important to you? And what would be helpful to you for a manager to do? And I would love to hear some of that feedback because we'll share those with others or when we're doing coaching or when we're going out and doing workshops. So thank you so much, Elaine. And this is a great tool for all of us, but especially for you managers out there if you want to help bolster your emotional intelligence and how you lead others.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Christine. Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye. Thanks everybody for listening. I'd like to give a special shout out to our podcast producer, Richard Francisco. Check out our notes for any details. And if you get anything out of this, please follow us. And if you enjoy it, please take a moment to rate us or write a comment. It will mean the world to us. We'd love to hear from you. And if you just can't get enough, follow me on TikTok and check out tlpnyc.com/podcast for more information.